What if the Great Pyramid of Giza, the oldest and last remaining wonder of the ancient world, was never a tomb at all? For 4,500 years, we have called it the final resting place of a pharaoh. Yet within its core, in the stark granite chamber, we find no body, no mummy, no inscriptions telling us of a king's journey to the afterlife. We find only a hollow, lidless coffer, a silent stone box that offers no answers. What if this granite vessel was never meant to hold a king, but was instead the humming, resonating heart of an ancient and forgotten machine? What if the entire colossal structure, built with a precision we still struggle to comprehend, was designed not for death, but for a purpose so advanced, so profound, that its true nature has been lost to the sands of time? Good evening. I am Mr. H, and this is Mystery History for Sleep, a place where we journey together through the great enigmas of our shared past. We do not seek easy answers here, but rather the comfort of shared wonder. If you feel a connection to these whispers from a time long ago, I invite you to become a fellow traveler on this path by subscribing to the channel. And if you wish, you can gently touch the notification bell, ensuring that you will always be alerted when a new expedition into the unknown is about to begin. Returning to that silent granite chamber, deep within a mountain of man-made stone, to believe it was simply a tomb is to ignore the sheer impossibility of its existence. Consider the scale: more than 2 million blocks of stone, some weighing as much as 80 tons, the equivalent of a modern locomotive. They were quarried and transported and lifted to the height of a 40-story building, all without the aid of steel, without the wheel, without the technologies we deem essential. These stones are fitted together with such flawless accuracy that a single sheet of paper cannot pass between them. The entire structure, spanning 13 acres, is aligned to the cardinal directions with a precision that would be the envy of any modern architect. This is not the work of a civilization in its infancy. This is the mark of mastery. It speaks of a deep understanding of mathematics, of engineering, of astronomy, and perhaps of physical principles we have yet to rediscover. So when we stand in that empty chamber and hear only silence, we must ask, is it truly empty? Or is it simply that we have forgotten how to listen? Perhaps the silence itself is the message. Perhaps the pyramid's purpose was not contained within its chambers, but was broadcast by the very shape and substance of the structure itself. Tonight, we will venture beyond the textbook explanation. We will entertain the audacious, explore the incredible, and allow ourselves to wonder if the greatest monument on our planet is also our greatest, most enduring mystery. For many years, the accepted wisdom held that the 3 great pyramids of Giza were positioned according to the whims of the pharaohs, their placement dictated by the sacred ground and the path of the Sunday. But in the later years of the 20th century, a new and radical idea was proposed, a theory that would forever change the way we look at these structures. This idea, known as the Orion correlation theory, suggests that the pyramids are not a random royal arrangement, but a deliberate and breathtakingly precise map of the heavens. It proposes that the 3 pyramids are a mirror image on Earth of the 3 stars that form the belt of the constellation Orion. Imagine standing on the plateau thousands of years ago, the Milky Way, a brilliant, shimmering river across the sky. The constellation of Orion, the great hunter, would have been a dominant feature of that celestial landscape. The theory argues that the ancient builders saw in this constellation a powerful symbol, a celestial counterpart to their own god of resurrection, Osiris, and so they decided to build a heaven on earth. The 2 larger pyramids, the Great Pyramid of Khufu and the Pyramid of Khafre, are positioned in a near-perfect diagonal line, just as the 2 brighter stars of Orion's belt, Al-Nitak and Al-Nilam, are. But it is the 3rd, smaller pyramid, that of Menkaure, that offers the most compelling piece of evidence. It is not on that same perfect diagonal line. Instead, it is slightly offset, just as the 3rd and dimmest star of the belt, Mintaka, is slightly offset from the other 2. The correlation does not end with placement. The theory also proposes that the relative sizes and brightness of the pyramids were meant to reflect the relative magnitudes, the brightness, of the stars themselves. The Great Pyramid, the largest, corresponds to Al-Nitak, the brightest of the 3 stars. The second pyramid, slightly smaller, corresponds to the slightly dimmer Al-Nilam, and the third and smallest pyramid corresponds to Mintaka, the faintest of the three. It is a stunning parallel, a design of such cosmic elegance that it seems to defy coincidence. But the theory goes deeper still, adding a dimension not of space, but of time. Using computer programs that can map the ancient skies, proponents of the theory wound back the celestial clock, watching the slow, patient procession of the stars. They found one moment in time where the alignment was perfect, where the pattern of the stars in the sky was an exact match for the pattern of the pyramids on the ground. That moment was not during the age when the pyramids were said to have been built, around 2,500 years before the Common Era. Instead, the perfect match occurred much, much earlier, in the year 10,500 years before the Common Era. This is a date of profound significance, for it aligns with the time the Egyptians called Zep Tepi, the first time, a golden age when the gods were said to have walked the earth among mortals. Could the pyramids be a monument not to the pharaohs who were buried within them, but a marker pointing back across the millennia to this mythical genesis, a way of freezing a perfect moment in time, the moment when heaven and earth were in perfect harmony? It is a beautiful, poetic, and powerful idea. And yet, the world of mainstream Egyptology and astronomy urges caution. Critics point out that the correlation is not, in fact, perfect. The angle of the stars in Orion's belt, when viewed from our vantage point on Earth, does not precisely match the angle of the pyramids on the ground. The deviation is small, but it is significant enough for many scientists to dismiss the connection. Furthermore, Egyptologists argue that while the constellation of Orion was important in later Egyptian dynasties, there is little to no textual evidence from the Old Kingdom, the era of the great pyramid builders, to suggest such a deep and architecturally significant stellar cult. They maintain that the primary alignment of the pyramids is solar, designed to interact with the sun at solstices and equinoxes, and that any apparent stellar connection is a modern interpretation, a projection of our own search for patterns onto the past. So the mystery remains. Are we looking at a deliberate celestial map, evidence of a lost astronomical wisdom, or is it merely a coincidental arrangement, a beautiful illusion born of our desire to find meaning in these silent stones? If the pyramids speak the language of the stars, they also seem to be fluent in the universal language of mathematics. The numbers encoded within the Great Pyramid's design are so fundamental, so specific, that they have led many to believe its architects were not just master builders, but mathematical sages of the highest order. The most famous of these mathematical constants is the one we know as pi, that sacred, irrational number that defines the perfect relationship between a circle's circumference and its diameter. If you were to measure the original perimeter of the Great Pyramid's base, and then divide that number by twice its original height, the result is a value so astonishingly close to pi that the difference is negligible. Think of what this implies. The builders would have needed to incorporate this transcendental number into their design, a number that Western civilization would not accurately calculate for another 2,000 years. It suggests a level of mathematical sophistication that simply should not have existed in the Bronze Age. Was this intentional? Was the pyramid a grand statement, a stone testament to their understanding of the fundamental geometry of the universe? Or could there be a simpler explanation? Some have argued that this ratio could be an accidental byproduct of their construction methods. If, for instance, they measured out the base of the pyramid and then determined the height by rolling a circular drum a set number of times, they would have inadvertently encoded the ratio of pi into the final structure without ever knowing the abstract mathematical concept itself. But the mathematical mysteries do not end there. The pyramid also appears to contain another of the universe's most profound numbers, the one known as the golden ratio, or phi. This is the divine proportion, a special relationship found throughout the natural world, in the elegant spiral of a nautilus shell, the branching of trees, and the arrangement of petals in a flower. It is a ratio often associated with beauty and harmony. Within the Great Pyramid, this golden ratio is found in the proportions of a key internal triangle, the one formed by the pyramid's vertical height, the horizontal distance from the center to the edge of the base, and the diagonal slant height of its face. The relationship between these lengths reflects this same divine proportion with incredible accuracy. Here again, we are faced with the same dilemma. To believe this was intentional is to credit the ancient Egyptians with a knowledge that history insists they did not possess. To believe it is a coincidence is to accept that two of the most fundamental mathematical constants in the universe appeared by chance in the design of a single structure. It asks us to believe that the builders, through sheer luck or intuitive craftsmanship, created a building that resonates with the deepest mathematical harmonies of nature. The debate rages on, a mathematical ghost haunting the corridors of the pyramid, leaving us to wonder whether we are looking at the work of brilliant artisans or members of a lost school of sacred geometry. From the distant realm of the stars and the abstract world of pure numbers, the pyramid's design brings us back down to Earth, quite literally anchoring itself to our planet with an almost unbelievable precision. Its placement on the globe is the first enigma. The Great Pyramid sits at a point on our planet, that is, by some calculations, the very center of all the Earth's landmass. It is situated at the intersection of the longest line of latitude and the longest line of longitude that cross over land. To have chosen such a spot would have required a complete and accurate knowledge of all the continents on Earth, a global survey of impossible scale for any ancient civilization. While the definition of a planet's center can be debated and is dependent on the type of map projection one uses, the pyramid's location remains a remarkable and statistically unlikely coincidence. But it is the pyramid's orientation that leaves no room for debate. The four sides of the Great Pyramid are aligned to the four cardinal directions: true north, south, east, and west, with an accuracy that is breathtaking. The deviation from true north is less than 1/15 of a single degree. This is a feat of precision that would be a challenge for surveyors today, using all the aid of global positioning satellites, lasers, and modern equipment. The ancient Egyptians, we are told, achieved this using only sticks, ropes, and the observation of the stars. The methods proposed for how they did this, such as tracking a star's rising and setting and bisecting the angle, are plausible, but to achieve such a minuscule margin of error on a structure of this magnitude suggests an almost supernatural level of skill and patience. This connection to the Earth itself has led to even more intricate and controversial theories. Researchers in the 19th century proposed that the pyramid was not just a building, but a repository of geodetic data, a scale model of our own planet. They argued that the Egyptians used a specific unit of measurement, which they called the pyramid inch, and that when the structure's dimensions are measured with this key, a universe of information is unlocked. The perimeter of the base, measured in these units, is said to correspond to the number of days in a solar year with stunning accuracy. More incredibly, it is claimed that the pyramid is a scale model of the northern hemisphere of the planet Earth, on a precise ratio of 1 to 43,200. The height of the pyramid multiplied by this number gives you the polar radius of the Earth, and the perimeter of the base multiplied by the same number gives you the Earth's equatorial circumference. These are claims that exist on the very fringe of academic acceptance. The concept of the pyramid inch is a modern invention, with no direct archaeological evidence to support its use by the ancient Egyptians. The correlations are seen by many as a classic case of finding patterns to fit a preconceived theory, of manipulating numbers until they provide the desired result. And yet, the core truths remain, undisputed by even the most hardened skeptics. The pyramid is aligned with a master's precision. It contains mathematical ratios that are fundamental to the cosmos, and it sits on the Earth as if it knows the very planet upon which it rests. The stones may be silent, but the design speaks volumes. It speaks of a wisdom, a purpose, and a mastery that defies the simple story we have been told. It leaves us here, under the desert stars, with the profound and unsettling feeling that our understanding of the ancient past is only just beginning. We must ask a question that is, in many ways, even more difficult. How? How does a civilization, armed with the simple tools of copper and stone, erect a monument that would challenge the full might of our own modern technology? The story of its construction is not one of engineering as we know it, but a saga of impossible problems met with solutions so ingenious, so radical, that they verge on the magical. To understand it, We must place ourselves there, on the hot sands of the Giza plateau, and face these problems as the builders did. Our first problem, the most fundamental of all, is the problem of the material itself. The common story tells of a heroic, almost unimaginable effort. Tens of thousands of men toiling in the quarries under a relentless sun, chipping away at the living rock with small copper chisels and pounding it into submission with balls of dolerite, a stone harder than granite. They would carve out millions of blocks, each weighing several tons, and then begin the colossal task of moving them. But listen closely. Does that story truly account for the perfection we see before us? Does it explain how these casing stones, the original brilliant white outer layer of the pyramid, were fitted together so perfectly that no mortar was needed, the joints so fine that a human hair cannot pass between them? Some researchers have looked at this perfection and concluded that the story is wrong. Not wrong in its spirit of ingenuity, but wrong in its most basic assumption. They propose that the Egyptians did not just quarry the pyramid. In large part, they cast it. This is the geopolymer theory, a radical idea that reframes the builders not as masons, but as master chemists, practitioners of a lost art of stone alchemy. The theory suggests that for the majority of the pyramid's bulk, the casing stones and the core blocks, the Egyptians used a far more elegant method than brute force. They would have taken soft, crumbly limestone from nearby, disaggregating it with the water of the Nile until it became a muddy slurry. Then, using natron, a type of salt abundant in Egypt, and lime and other natural binders, they would have initiated a chemical reaction, a process of geopolymerization. They would have created a high-quality, artificial limestone concrete. This slurry could then be carried up the side of the growing pyramid in buckets or bags, a far easier task than hauling multi-ton blocks. Once at the desired height, it would be poured into simple wooden molds and left to harden in place. Suddenly, the impossible perfection of the joints is explained. The blocks were not cut to fit, they were cast against one another, creating a flawless seal every time. This theory also solves other nagging problems. It explains why some blocks appear to be molded around each other in complex corners, a feat impossible with solid quarry blocks. It would dramatically reduce the need for the vast forests of wood required for sledges, rollers, and enormous ramps. And it explains the evidence found by those who have examined the stones under a microscope. Some casing stones have a higher water content than any natural limestone from the Giza quarries. They contain microscopic air bubbles and organic fibers, even human hairs, that seem to have been trapped within the mixture as it hardened. The very structure of the stone is amorphous, random, like concrete, rather than the distinct sedimentary layers of natural rock. While this theory is still heavily debated, with many geologists insisting the stones are natural, it presents us with a tantalizing possibility that the secret to the pyramid was not just muscle, but a profound and forgotten understanding of chemistry. Yet, this elegant solution cannot account for the entire structure. Deep within the pyramid, forming the ceilings and walls of the most sacred chambers, are colossal monoliths of solid granite. These stones, weighing up to 80 tons apiece, are not cast. They are crystalline rock, hewn from the quarries of Aswan, more than 500 miles to the south. Here, the problem of material is solved, but it gives way to an even greater one, the problem of movement. How were these impossible weights transported across such a vast distance, and then, most mysteriously of all, lifted nearly to the apex of this artificial mountain? The conventional answer is the ramp. We are asked to imagine a colossal earthen structure, either straight or spiraling, growing alongside the pyramid. But as we contemplate this, the solution begins to create problems of its own. A simple, straight ramp that reached the top of the pyramid would need to be over a mile long to maintain a manageable incline. The material required to build such a ramp would exceed the volume of the pyramid itself. A spiraling ramp would have presented immense difficulties in turning the huge blocks around sharp corners and would have obscured the very lines of the pyramid the builders needed to maintain their precision. Some have proposed a ramp built inside the pyramid, but this too presents structural problems and a lack of conclusive evidence. The ramp, in any of its forms, seems an inefficient, almost clumsy solution for a people who demonstrated such elegance and precision in every other aspect of their work. It forces us to wonder if they had another way, a technology that left no trace. Could they have mastered a force we are only now beginning to understand? The ancient world is filled with legends of great stones being moved with the power of sound, of priests and sages using chants and harmonic frequencies to levitate massive objects. We dismiss these as myths, as fanciful stories. But is it possible that a lost science of acoustics, of focused vibration and resonance, could have been used to reduce the effective weight of these granite beams, making them manageable for teams of men to guide into place? It is a thought that hovers on the edge of science fiction, yet the acoustic properties of the Granite King's chamber, which resonates at specific, deep frequencies, continue to puzzle researchers. Or perhaps the solution was not so esoteric, but equally ingenious, using the very element that gave life to Egypt: water. Imagine a system of water-filled shafts and locks built into the core of the pyramid. The granite blocks, brought from Aswan on barges, could be floated into a chamber at the pyramid's base. The chamber is sealed, and water from the Nile is pumped upwards, possibly using a series of simple but effective hydraulic pumps. The block, its immense weight made buoyant by the water, rises with the water level, up through the heart of the structure. At the desired level, a gate is opened, and the block is guided into its final position. We know the Egyptians were unparalleled masters of canals, irrigation, and naval engineering. They built fleets of magnificent ships, not as models, but as fully functional vessels. Is it so great a leap to imagine they might have applied their hydraulic genius to their most ambitious project, creating a secret, water-powered elevator hidden within the stone? This brings us to our final and perhaps greatest problem, the problem of the people. No matter the technology, no matter the method, the pyramid remains a profoundly human endeavor. Who were the souls who poured their lives into this colossal undertaking? The popular image, cemented by Hollywood films, is one of misery. Legions of slaves, captured from foreign lands, driven by the crack of a whip under a punishing Sunday. But this image, we now know, is almost entirely false. Archaeological excavations in the shadow of the pyramids have unearthed a lost city, a sprawling settlement that was not a labor camp, but a highly organized community. The evidence discovered there has painted a new, revolutionary portrait of the pyramid builders. They have found the remains of bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves of bread and beer each day. They have found piles of animal bones, revealing that the workers were fed on the finest cuts of prime beef, a luxury in the ancient world. They have found the skeletons of the workers themselves, and these bones tell a remarkable story. They show evidence of hard labor, yes, but they also show evidence of expert medical care. Bones are set, fractures are healed. Even amputations were performed with a skill that suggests a deep concern for the well-being of the workforce. This was not a disposable population of slaves. This was a highly skilled, well-fed, and well-cared-for team of Egyptian craftsmen and laborers. They were organized into divisions and crews, with names like the Friends of Khufu and the Drunkards of Menkaure. They were part of a great national project, a collective effort that drew resources and skilled artisans from all corners of the kingdom. So we must erase the image of the whip and replace it with a new one. But what does it show? What could motivate such dedication, such a fanatical pursuit of perfection that would span generations? The answer cannot be found in fear or coercion. It must be found in faith. These were not slaves building a tomb for a tyrant. These were devoted citizens building a stairway to the heavens for their living God. They believed that the pharaoh was the incarnation of divine order, and that his successful journey into the afterlife was essential for the stability of the entire cosmos, for the rising of the Nile, for the rising of the sun itself. Their work was not a burden. It was a sacred calling. Every block they set, every surface they polished, was an act of prayer, a contribution to maintaining the divine balance of the universe. The perfection of the pyramid was not a demand from a king, but a reflection of the perfection of their faith. And in this, we find the most powerful forgotten technology of all, the boundless, mountain-moving power of a unified human will focused on a single transcendent purpose. We have explored the forgotten technologies that might have brought it into being, but now we must ask about its purpose, its ultimate function. To do this, we must perform a thought experiment. We must, for a time, set aside everything we have been told about tombs, pharaohs, and the afterlife. Let us instead approach this structure as an engineer would approach a mysterious and silent machine. Let us walk through its chambers and passageways not as tourists, but as investigators, attempting to reverse engineer its function by examining its components. What if the Great Pyramid was never a static monument, a place of rest for the dead? What if it was a dynamic, functioning device, a colossal engine of stone designed to harness the energies of the Earth and the cosmos? Every machine needs a power source, a prime mover that initiates its function. Our investigation, therefore, begins not at the top, but deep in the bedrock beneath the pyramid. Here we find the subterranean chamber, a room that has long puzzled Egyptologists. It is rough, unfinished, and chaotic, a stark contrast to the mathematical perfection found everywhere else. The conventional story suggests it was the original burial chamber, abandoned in favor of a higher, more glorious one. But in our machine, this chamber is not an abandoned failure, it is the engine room. To understand why, we must look at where it is placed. It lies deep within the limestone layers of the Giza plateau, layers that are porous and saturated with water from an underground aquifer, a system of channels that are themselves fed by the mighty Nile River. Proponents of this incredible theory suggest that the builders intentionally excavated this chamber to interact with this underground water. The Nile's annual flood would cause the water table to rise and fall, creating a subtle, pulsing pressure within the aquifer. This pulse, channeled through specific fissures in the rock, could have created a low-frequency vibration, a phenomenon known as a water hammer effect. This would have generated a steady, powerful hum of infrasound, a sound too low for human ears to hear, but one that would have vibrated through the bedrock and up into the very foundations of the pyramid above. The unfinished, rough-hewn nature of the chamber would not have been a flaw, but a feature designed to maximize this resonance. In this model, the pyramid was not powered by fire or steam, but by the very heartbeat of the river, a slow, powerful, and constant source of vibrational energy. From this subterranean engine room, the energy would have traveled upwards into the body of the machine itself. Let us now ascend into what are called the Queen's and King's chambers. In the tomb model, these are simply rooms for a monarch and his consort. In our machine model, they are sophisticated reaction and resonance chambers. Let us first enter the Queen's chamber, with its gabled limestone roof. Strange, black salt deposits, up to half an inch thick, have been found coating its walls. Analysis has shown this to be a mixture of calcite and gypsum, which could indicate a past chemical reaction involving gas and water. The theory proposes that the two mysterious, narrow shafts leading out from this chamber were not for the Queen's soul to ascend to the stars, but were pipes. One shaft would have carried a dilute solution of hydrated zinc, the other a weak hydrochloric acid. When these two chemicals mixed within the chamber, they would have produced a vigorous, bubbling reaction, generating vast quantities of hydrogen gas. This hydrogen, the lightest and most energetic of all elements, would then have been funneled upwards. It would travel towards the very heart of the machine, the King's chamber. This room is a masterpiece of engineering, constructed entirely of massive, perfectly fitted blocks of Aswan granite. Granite is a remarkable stone, rich in quartz crystals, and quartz has a very special property known as the piezoelectric effect. When placed under immense pressure, quartz crystals generate an electric charge. The granite blocks of the King's chamber are under the colossal pressure of the millions of tons of stone above them. As the low-frequency vibrations from the subterranean chamber pulsed upwards, they would have caused these stressed quartz crystals to vibrate, generating a steady stream of electricity. Now, imagine this chamber, humming with piezoelectric energy, being filled with the highly energetic hydrogen gas produced in the chamber below. The energy in the room would have excited the hydrogen atoms, amplifying the vibrations to a powerful, resonant hum. The entire King's chamber, a box made of a piezoelectric material, would have become a colossal sound resonator, converting the Earth's vibrations into a column of pure, energetic sound. And at its center sits the granite coffer, the object we call a sarcophagus. In this model, it is not a coffin, but a finely tuned resonant box, the focal point of the chamber's power, humming with an energy that would have been palpable to anyone standing inside. The entire room was an amplifier, taking the gentle pulse of the earth and transforming it into a powerful wave of acoustic and electromagnetic energy. Every sophisticated machine needs wiring, a way to direct and control its power. Let us look again at the so-called star shafts leading out from the king's chamber. These are not simple air vents. They are narrow, four-sided, and precisely angled. In our machine, they are not pathways for the soul. They are waveguides. A waveguide is a structure that directs waves, such as electromagnetic energy or sound. The energized sound and microwave energy produced within the king's chamber would have been channeled into these shafts. They were, in effect, the machine's output terminals, beaming a focused stream of energy out from the pyramid's core. All of this energy would need to be contained. The bulk of the pyramid, constructed of Tura limestone, which is low in magnesium, would have acted as a massive electrical insulator, preventing the energy from dissipating outwards into the ground. The very shape of the pyramid, its precise 51-degree angle, is a perfect shape for containing and reflecting energy waves internally, focusing them upwards towards the apex. And what was at the apex? A golden capstone, a pyramidion, which has been missing for millennia. Gold is one of the world's most perfect electrical conductors. This capstone was not a mere ornament. It was the machine's final component, its terminal, or antenna. It would have collected all the focused energy from the core of the pyramid and transmitted it. But transmitted it where and how? The theory proposes that it would have drawn in the collected energy and beamed it upwards, creating an ionized pathway to the conductive layers of the Earth's ionosphere, creating a stable, global source of wireless power. Into this already complex model, we must now introduce the latest discovery, the Big Void. This enormous hidden chamber, discovered using cosmic ray imaging, adds a massive unknown component to our machine. What was its purpose? Was it a damping chamber designed to absorb excess vibrations and prevent the resonating pyramid from shaking itself apart? Was it a reservoir for the gases or chemicals used in the reaction chambers? Or could it have been a capacitor, a place to store the immense energy before it was released in controlled bursts? Its existence proves that we are still only beginning to understand the true complexity of this structure, and it fits perfectly into the model of a machine with components whose functions we are yet to decipher. So we are left with this breathtaking, almost unbelievable vision, a vision of the Great Pyramid, not as a passive, silent tomb, but as a living, humming geothermal and chemical power plant, a device that drew power from the Earth's vibrations, amplified it through crystal and hydrogen, and prepared it for transmission. It is a theory that exists far outside the bounds of mainstream archaeology. It has no direct proof from ancient texts, and it relies on a chain of speculative science. And yet, it is a theory that seems to address so many of the pyramid's strangest features: its unfinished chamber, its chemical, stained walls, its granite core, its precise angles, its missing golden peak. It provides a reason for the obsessive, fanatical perfection of the builders. They were not just building a monument, they were building a machine. And if they did, we are left with the ultimate question of all. What was this power for? Was it used to light their cities? To power sophisticated tools? Or was its purpose something even stranger? Something to do with the very consciousness of the planet itself? The machine is silent now, but the question of its purpose echoes louder than ever. I often picture this story, this whisper, traveling out from this quiet room and across the world on invisible currents, reaching fellow travelers in the deep of the night. It makes me wonder, where is this story finding you at this very moment? If you feel so inclined, I would be honored if you would leave a comment below, sharing the city or the country where you are listening, and the time of your night or morning. There is a quiet magic in knowing that while we may be separated by vast oceans and continents, we can be united, for a moment, in our shared curiosity for the mysteries of the past. Let us now continue our journey. We approach the great Sphinx of Giza, an enigma of a different kind, carved not from countless blocks, but from the living bedrock of the earth itself. It is the largest monolithic statue in the world, a singular, breathtaking creation. The official story, the one written in our history books, tells us that this is the face of the pharaoh Khafre, carved in his likeness during his reign, around 2,500 years before the Common Era. For decades, for centuries, this was the accepted truth. The Sphinx was a known quantity, its age and identity filed away. But in the late 20th century, a small group of independent researchers looked at this ancient witness and decided to cross-examine its story. They believed that the Sphinx was hiding a secret, not in some hidden chamber, but in plain sight, written across the surface of its own weathered body. They proposed a theory so radical it would threaten to rewrite the very first chapter of human civilization. They believed the stone itself was telling them that the Sphinx was thousands of years older than anyone had ever imagined. To understand this audacious claim, we must become geological detectives. Our crime scene is the Sphinx and the hollowed-out enclosure that surrounds it. Our victim is the accepted timeline of history, and our primary witness is the stone itself, for stone does not lie. It carries the memory of every wind that has blown against it, every grain of sand that has scoured its surface, and every drop of rain that has traced a path down its flanks. The story of its life, its true age, is recorded in the patterns of its erosion. Let us begin by establishing a baseline, a control for our investigation. Let us look at other monuments on the Giza plateau, tombs and temples that we know, with certainty, were built during the Old Kingdom, during the time of Khafre. When we examine their weathered surfaces, we see the clear and unmistakable signature of erosion by wind and sand. We see sharp horizontal layers, where the harder strata of rock have resisted the wind, and the softer layers have been scoured away beneath them. It looks like a geological layer cake, a pattern of crisp, undulating lines, carved by millennia of exposure to a dry, wind-blown desert climate. This is the fingerprint of Giza's environment for the last 5,000 years. This is what erosion in a hyper-arid desert looks like. Now, let us turn our investigative gaze back to the Sphinx. We look at its head, which we know has been recarved several times throughout history, and is made of a harder, more resistant layer of limestone. But then we look down, at the body of the lion, and most crucially, at the sheer walls of the enclosure from which the Sphinx was carved. And here, the forensic evidence changes dramatically. The fingerprint is wrong. Instead of the sharp, horizontal lines of wind and sand erosion, we see something entirely different. We see deep, vertical fissures. We see rounded, rolling, undulating profiles. We see deep gullies and channels running from top to bottom, patterns that look less like the work of wind and more like the work of water. Specifically, they look like the patterns created by immense volumes of rainfall, pouring down over the stone for a very, very long time, century after century, millennium after millennium. This is the heart of the mystery, the central clue in our investigation. The body of the Sphinx and the walls of its pit are telling a story of a wet climate, a time of significant and sustained precipitation. A geologist, Robert Schoch, was the first mainstream academic to put his reputation on the line and state this simple yet earth-shattering observation. He confirmed that these weathering patterns were classic examples of precipitation-induced erosion. He was not a historian or an amateur theorist. He was a tenured professor of geology, an expert in how rock weathers and decays. And his expert testimony was clear. The primary weathering of the Sphinx was caused not by the desert wind, but by water. This testimony presents us with a profound and uncomfortable paradox. To solve it, we must consult another expert witness, the field of paleoclimatology, the study of the Earth's ancient climates. And the climate data is unambiguous. The Giza Plateau, and the entire Sahara region, has been a hyper-arid desert, almost exactly as we see it today, for the last 5,000 years. There have simply not been periods of rainfall significant enough to carve these deep, vertical channels into the limestone. To find a climate in northern Africa that was wet enough, that saw enough heavy rain to create the features we see on the Sphinx, we have to travel back in time. We have to go back past the age of Khafre, past the age of the first pharaohs, past the dawn of Egyptian civilization as we know it. We have to go back to a time before 5,000 years before the Common Era, to a period when the last ice age had ended, and the Sahara was not a desert, but a lush, green savanna dotted with lakes and rivers, a place that experienced seasonal, heavy monsoonal rains. The geological evidence on the Sphinx's body is pointing to a date of construction that is, at a minimum, 7,000 years old, and perhaps much older, closer to 10 or 12,000 years old. If this is true, the implications are almost too vast to comprehend. It would mean that a sophisticated culture, capable of carving the world's largest monolithic statue, existed on the Giza plateau thousands of years before the pharaohs. It would mean that the history of civilization does not begin in Sumeria and Egypt, but has a much older, much deeper, and now completely lost, opening chapter. It would mean that the Sphinx is a relic, a lonely survivor from a forgotten epoch of human history. Naturally, a claim this extraordinary has been met with fierce resistance from the world of mainstream Egyptology. The entire, carefully constructed timeline of Egyptian history would be thrown into chaos. So, in our role as detectives, we must listen to the cross-examination. The critics have proposed alternative explanations for the water-like erosion. One theory is that the annual flooding of the Nile River, which in ancient times reached closer to the Giza plateau, could have soaked the base of the Sphinx enclosure, causing water damage. But this does not explain the deep, vertical fissures running from the top of the enclosure walls to the bottom. Flooding would cause damage at the base, not mimic the effects of rainfall from above. Another, more complex theory suggests the damage is from a process called haloclasty. This proposes that morning dew and moisture in the air could have been drawn up into the porous limestone from the ground, carrying with it dissolved salts. As the water evaporated, the salts would crystallize and expand, flaking away the surface of the rock over millennia. This could, in theory, create rounded profiles. However, the proponents of the older date argue that haloclasty does not typically create the deep, long, vertical gullies we see, which are so characteristic of runoff from rainfall. Perhaps the most common argument against the water erosion hypothesis is that the limestone of the Sphinx's body is simply of a very poor quality, and that it has decayed more quickly and in a different way than the stone of the surrounding temples. The Sphinx was not built from uniform blocks, but carved from the existing bedrock, which consists of alternating hard and soft layers. The argument is that the soft layers have simply crumbled away in a strange pattern over the millennia. But here, the lead investigator presents their final, most compelling piece of evidence. They point to the tombs south of the Sphinx, structures that are known, without a doubt, to have been carved during the Old Kingdom. These tombs were cut from the very same layers of Giza bedrock, the same mixture of hard and soft limestone, and yet, the erosion on these tombs is classic wind and sand erosion. It is the sharp, horizontal, layered pattern we see elsewhere. It is not the deep, vertical, rain-washed pattern we see on the Sphinx and its enclosure walls. Two structures, built from the same stone, in the same location, but showing completely different weathering signatures. The testimony of the stone seems to be telling us that they have experienced two different climates. One has experienced only the arid desert of the last 5,000 years. The other, the Sphinx, appears to carry the scars of an older, wetter world. And so, our investigation reaches an impasse. We are left with a historical paradox. The archaeological evidence, the stylistic association with surrounding temples, and the entire established history of Egypt places the Sphinx firmly in the reign of Khafre, around 2,500 years before the Common Era. But the geological evidence, the testimony of the stone itself, seems to be pointing to a time thousands of years earlier. If the Sphinx is truly that old, then who carved it? What was their name? What happened to their civilization? The lion-bodied guardian sits in its pit, offering no answers, its face weathered by time, its gaze fixed on the horizon. It is a riddle not of words, but of water and stone, a mystery that challenges not just what we know about ancient Egypt, but what we know about the very origins of our own story. The riddle of the Sphinx's age, written in the slow language of water and stone, suggests a history far deeper than we know. It points to a forgotten chapter, a lost civilization. But what if the Sphinx guards a secret not just of time, but of knowledge? What if, deep in the bedrock beneath its silent pores, lies a library of the lost world, a chamber containing the answers to the greatest questions of our past? This is not a theory born of geology, but a story that comes to us from the realm of legend, prophecy, and the strange, uncharted territory of dreams. To explore it, we must leave behind the solid ground of empirical evidence for a moment and follow a map drawn not on papyrus, but in the visions of a sleeping prophet. In the first half of the 20th century, a man named Edgar Cayce, an American mystic, gained fame for his ability to enter a self-induced trance and answer questions on topics ranging from health to history. In these trances, he spoke of the lost continent of Atlantis, a highly advanced civilization that was destroyed in a great cataclysm. But before their world vanished beneath the waves, Cayce claimed, the Atlanteans managed to preserve their history, their wisdom, and their scientific knowledge. They gathered their most important records and secreted them away in a safe place, a deep and hidden vault that he called the Hall of Records. And the location of this time capsule, according to Cayce's visions, was in Egypt, buried in the bedrock between the pores of the Great Sphinx. He prophesied that this chamber would be rediscovered towards the end of the 20th century, and that its contents would revolutionize our understanding of human history. For many, this is nothing more than a fanciful tale, the product of a mystic's imagination. And yet, the idea of secret chambers beneath Giza is not unique to Edgar Cayce. It is an ancient and persistent legend. Roman historians wrote of vast, labyrinthine subterranean galleries, said to house the knowledge of a time before a great flood. Ancient Arab folklore is filled with stories of hidden passages beneath the Sphinx, leading to chambers of unimaginable wonder and treasure. These are the whispers, the mythological echoes that seem to corroborate the modern prophecy, suggesting that the quest for a hidden library is a very old one indeed. It is a treasure hunt that has been passed down through the ages, a legend of a library containing not just books, but the very genesis of our civilization. In the latter part of the 20th century, as Cayce's predicted time of discovery drew near, this mythological quest took on a new, scientific urgency. The treasure hunters were no longer mystics or adventurers with shovels, but geophysicists and geologists armed with the tools of modern exploration. They came to Giza not to dig, but to see through the stone, to map the unseen voids and chambers that might lie hidden beneath the sand. They brought with them seismographs, devices that listen to the echo of sound waves sent deep into the earth, and ground-penetrating radar, which sends electromagnetic pulses down to create a map of subterranean structures. They were, in essence, using technology to search for the room that had been seen only in a dream. The search was led by the same researchers who had questioned the Sphinx's age, John Anthony West and Robert Schoch. They reasoned that if the Sphinx was truly a relic from a much older civilization, then perhaps the legends of what lay beneath it also had a basis in fact. For years, they and other teams conducted surveys around the Sphinx, methodically scanning the bedrock beneath its pores and flanks, and they found something. The data began to reveal anomalies, places where the echoes returned faster than they should, places where the radar pulses painted a picture not of solid rock, but of empty space. The whispers from the deep were no longer just a myth. They were becoming data points on a screen. The most significant of these discoveries was made directly in the area that Cayce had indicated, in the bedrock between and slightly in front of the Sphinx's pores. Here, the seismic surveys mapped out a large, distinct, and strangely regular anomaly. It appeared to be a chamber, several dozen feet below the surface. Its shape was remarkably geometric and uniform, suggesting it was not a natural cave or fissure, but a man-made construction. The data painted a picture of a rectangular void, its dimensions precise and its corners sharp. The modern treasure hunters, with their high-tech maps, had found what appeared to be the X that marked the spot. The Hall of Records, it seemed, was not just a prophecy, it was a physical location. The excitement that followed this discovery was immense. The scientific data appeared to confirm the legend. The quest had reached its final stage. All that was left was to drill a small hole, to lower a fiber optic camera, and to peer into the darkness of a chamber that had been sealed for potentially thousands of years. But here, the treasure hunt came to a sudden and frustrating halt. The door to the final chamber remained locked, not by an ancient curse or a stone plug, but by modern bureaucracy. The Egyptian authorities, who hold ultimate control over all archaeological work at Giza, proved extremely reluctant to grant permission for any kind of physical exploration. Citing concerns for the stability of the ancient monument, and perhaps wary of the sensationalism surrounding the quest, they repeatedly denied requests to drill. For a brief period, another team was granted a license to explore, and they too drilled boreholes in the area, but their official findings were inconclusive, or at least, what was released to the public was. The waters were muddied, the permissions were rescinded, and the area around the Sphinx was once again closed off to this specific line of inquiry. The quest had hit a wall. The scientific evidence points to the existence of a man-made chamber, precisely where the prophet said it would be. But its existence remains unverified, its contents a complete mystery, and so we are left to wonder, to stand at the threshold of a discovery that may never be made in our lifetime. What lies within that rectangular void, deep beneath the pores of the Sphinx? Is it truly the Hall of Records? A library of stone tablets and scrolls containing the wisdom of a lost civilization, the history of Atlantis, and technologies that could change our world? Or is it something more mundane, a simple, unfinished burial chamber, perhaps for a pharaoh whose plans were later changed? Could it be a ritual chamber, empty of artifacts but aligned to some sacred purpose we no longer understand? Or is it possible that the legends are true, and the authorities know more than they are letting on, choosing to protect a secret they believe the world is not yet ready for? The quest is incomplete. The treasure has been located on the map, but it remains buried, its nature and value a matter of pure, tantalizing speculation. The Sphinx keeps its greatest secret, not written on its surface, but held silently, deep within the earth beneath its feet. Let us now depart from the vast, singular enigma of the Giza Plateau. Our journey takes us away from the desert sands and into a quiet, hidden gallery, a metaphorical museum that houses a collection of impossible things. These are the artifacts that should not exist, the orphans of history. They are the pieces that do not fit into the neat and tidy puzzle of our past. They are the whispers of a different timeline, a past where the spark of genius ignited technologies that, according to our own story, were not to be invented for more than 1,000 years. Each object in this collection is a paradox, a challenge, and a profound mystery. Our first exhibit is a ghost from the sea, a treasure salvaged from a world of silence and depth. In the first year of the 20th century, a group of Greek sponge divers, blown off course by a storm, took shelter near the small island of Antikythera. Diving in the unfamiliar waters, they stumbled upon the wreck of an ancient Roman cargo ship, sunk deep beneath the waves for 2 millennia. They salvaged what they could: bronze statues, marble sculptures, and among the treasures, a corroded, unassuming lump of bronze and wood, so encrusted with sea life that it was at first mistaken for a rock. For months, it sat unnoticed in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. Then one day, the corroded lump cracked open, revealing something that was simply not possible: a universe of interlocking gears, dials, and precisely machined wheels. What lay within that calcified shell would take the world's best minds the better part of a century to fully comprehend. Using advanced X-rays and sophisticated imaging technology, researchers peered through the layers of corrosion, digitally reconstructing the machine piece by piece. What they found was a mechanism of such breathtaking complexity that it shattered our entire understanding of the ancient world. They had discovered the Antikythera mechanism, a device now known as the world's first analog computer. This was not a simple tool. It was a clockwork cosmos, a portable planetarium of bronze. Within a wooden case, no larger than a modern laptop, were more than 30 precision-engineered gears. By turning a single hand crank, the operator could set in motion a complex dance of celestial bodies. The front dial showed the position of the sun and the moon against the zodiac, as well as a calendar of the 365 days of the year, ingeniously accounting for the leap year every fourth year. The back dials were even more extraordinary. One tracked the cycles of the moon, predicting not just its phases, but also the coming lunar and solar eclipses with stunning accuracy. Another was a calendar for the timing of the ancient Pan-Hellenic Games, including the most famous of all, the Olympiad. But the true genius of the device, the part that continues to awe scientists, is how it modeled the irregular orbit of the moon. The ancient Greeks knew that the moon appears to speed up and slow down in its journey across the sky. To account for this, the anonymous maker of the mechanism designed an ingenious system of a pin moving within a slot on an epicyclic gear, a mechanical solution so sophisticated, so elegant, that nothing like it would be seen in the history of science for another 1,400 years, until the great astronomical clocks of medieval Europe. Here, then, is the paradox that sits at the heart of our first exhibit. We have the object, we can see its gears, we can understand its function, but we cannot understand how it could exist. It appears in the historical record like a ghost, with no known predecessors and no descendants. Who was the Archimedes, the ancient Da Vinci, who possessed the mind to conceive of such a thing? What advanced school of mechanical engineering existed in the ancient Greek world to provide the knowledge and the tools to cut these precise gear teeth and assemble this intricate cosmic calculator? And most hauntingly of all, where did this tradition go? Why did this incredible technological lineage vanish from the face of the earth so completely that the world had to, in essence, reinvent the very concept of complex machinery more than a millennium later? The Antikythera mechanism does not just ask us what the ancients knew, it asks us what we, in our modern arrogance, have forgotten. Let us now move to our second exhibit in this gallery of the impossible. It is a far humbler object, yet it poses a question that is, in its own way, just as profound. We journey from the Aegean Sea to the arid lands near modern-day Baghdad, in ancient Mesopotamia. In the 1930s, during an archaeological dig, a small and peculiar clay jar was unearthed. It was only a few inches tall, a simple, unassuming terracotta pot, but what was inside it was anything but simple. Sealed at the top with an asphalt plug was an iron rod, and suspended around this rod, but not touching it, was a cylinder made of pure copper. It was a strange and deliberate arrangement, and when modern scientists looked at this simple construction, a clay jar, two different metals, and a seal, they recognized it instantly. They had seen this design before, not in the annals of archaeology, but in the pages of a first-year chemistry textbook. It was the blueprint for a galvanic cell. It was, in its most basic form, a battery. The theory is as simple as it is shocking. If one were to fill this jar with a mild acidic liquid, such as the vinegar or grape juice readily available in ancient Mesopotamia, the chemical reaction between the two metals would produce a small but steady electrical charge, a gentle but persistent flow of electrons. Replicas of the Baghdad battery have been built, and they work. They produce a current of around 1 to 2 volts. The question, then, is not whether it could have been a battery, but whether it was. And if it was, we are faced with a historical thunderclap. It would mean that a rudimentary knowledge of electricity existed 2,000 years before Alessandro Volta invented the modern battery. But it also presents us with a deeper mystery. What on earth would the ancients have used this power for? A single battery produces a very small charge, not enough to power a city, or even a single light bulb as we know it. Or could it? To explore this question, our museum tour must take an unexpected detour back to the land of the pharaohs. Let us travel to the magnificent temple of Hathor at Dendera. Deep within the crypts of this temple, carved upon the stone walls, is a series of famous and deeply enigmatic reliefs. These carvings depict robed figures holding what appear to be enormous, transparent, bulb-like objects. Each bulb rests upon a base that looks strikingly like a lotus flower, and a long, thick cord or cable extends from the base of the lotus, connecting it to a rectangular box on which a D-jade pillar sits. Inside each of these bulbs is a long, wavy snake. To the esoteric researcher, this is a depiction of ancient electrical technology. The bulb is a glass lamp. The lotus is the socket. The cable is the power cord. The The box is the power generator. And the snake? The snake is the symbol of divine energy, the representation of the brilliant, fiery serpent of light that would have appeared within the evacuated glass bulb when the current was switched on. Is it possible? Is this the answer to the Baghdad battery's purpose? Perhaps one battery was not enough, but a series of them, linked together, could have produced enough power to create a high-voltage, low-current discharge, enough to make a gas-filled tube glow. It could explain the perplexing lack of soot from torches or oil lamps on the ceilings of many deep tombs and passages. But now, as the curator of this collection, I must offer the sober, academic perspective. Mainstream Egyptology interprets the Dendera reliefs not as a technical schematic, but as a beautiful piece of mythology. The scene, they explain, depicts the birth of the serpent god Harsomptus from a lotus flower, a central theme in Egyptian creation myths. The bulb is the womb of the sky goddess, Nut, and the cable is the celestial barge of the sun god. Likewise, archaeologists have proposed alternative uses for the Baghdad battery. Perhaps it was used for a mild form of electroplating, gilding small items with a thin layer of gold or silver. Or perhaps its function was not electrical at all, and it was simply a sacred vessel for storing scrolls of papyrus, protected from the elements by the asphalt seal. We are left with two exhibits from two different cultures, separated by hundreds of miles and hundreds of years. One is a potential power source, a captured spark of lightning in a clay jar. The other is a potential power consumer, a carved image of a brilliant, glowing lamp. Are they connected? Are they two stray pieces from a single, lost puzzle of ancient electrical science? Or are they simply two separate instances of our modern desire to see our own technological reflection in the enigmatic mirrors of the past? Like all the objects in this secret gallery, they offer no easy answers. They are simply here. They exist. And their silent, impossible presence is a profound testament to the simple fact that the story of our past is far from over, and its most electrifying chapters may not yet have been read. Now, we turn our attention to a document, a fragile piece of gazelle skin that has caused more debate and wonder than almost any other historical map. Our quest takes us not to a ruin or a tomb, but to the quiet archival world of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. It was here, in the early years of the 20th century, during a cataloguing of the palace's vast collection, that a remarkable document was rediscovered. It was a fragment of a larger world map, dated in the Islamic calendar to a year corresponding with 1513 in the Common Era. It was signed by its creator, a man named Piri Reis. Piri Reis was not a fantasist or a dreamer. He was a celebrated admiral in the powerful Ottoman navy, a seasoned mariner, a military strategist, and one of the most respected cartographers of his age. His was a world of high-stakes naval intelligence, where accurate maps meant the difference between victory and defeat, between wealth and ruin. His work was a state secret, a tool of empire, and when we look at his map, we see the work of a master. The familiar coastlines of Western Europe, of North Africa, of the newly discovered shores of Brazil, are drawn with a precision and a wealth of detail that was astonishing for its time. The ports are marked, the rivers are noted, the islands are placed with a remarkable accuracy that established his credibility beyond any doubt. This document is the product of a meticulous, professional mind, and it is this very professionalism that makes the anomalies on the map so deeply unsettling. As our eyes drift down the parchment, away from the familiar shores of the Atlantic, we come to the southern edge of the map, and here, the world as we know it begins to unravel. Sprawling across the bottom of the map is a vast landmass, a southern continent. Its coastline is detailed, showing bays, peninsulas, and what appear to be mountain ranges in the interior. In its general shape and position, it corresponds with the northern coast of the continent we now call Antarctica. And here we encounter our first impossibility. Antarctica was not officially discovered by the modern world until the early 19th century, almost exactly 300 years after Piri Reis drew this map. How could a 16th century Ottoman admiral have known of the existence of a continent that was, to the rest of his world, a complete and utter unknown? But this geographical mystery, as profound as it is only the beginning. The second impossibility is even more difficult to comprehend. The coastline depicted on the Piri-Reis map, this land that so closely resembles Antarctica, appears to be free of ice. The map shows a coast of land and rock, not the immense, miles-thick ice shelf that we know covers the continent today. This is not just a historical anomaly, it is a geological one. According to modern science, the Antarctic ice sheet has been in place not for centuries, but for millions of years. For anyone to have mapped the true coastline beneath the ice, they would have needed to do so in an impossibly remote and ancient past, a time before the Great Ice came, a time when Antarctica was a temperate land. How could this be? Piri-Reis himself, the intelligence officer, provides us with our most crucial clue. He wrote notes directly onto the map, a sort of cartographic debriefing for posterity. And in these notes, he makes a fascinating and vital statement. This map was not his own original creation. He declares that he is not responsible for the primary survey. Instead, his map is a compilation, a synthesis of information drawn from about 20 different source maps. Some of these, he notes, were modern charts captured from contemporary explorers like Christopher Columbus, but others, he claims, were far more ancient. He speaks of using maps from the libraries of Constantinople, charts that he says dated back to the time of Alexander the Great, and perhaps even earlier. Here, the mystery deepens. The trail of intelligence goes cold, leading us back into the mists of antiquity. If Piri-Reis used ancient source maps, and those source maps contained information that was impossible for even the cartographers of Alexander's time to know, then where did those maps come from? This question has given rise to one of the most intriguing and controversial theories in alternative history. It is the idea that the Piri-Reis map is our last, tantalizing glimpse of the work of a forgotten civilization. The theory, most famously advanced by the historian Charles Hapgood, suggests that in the distant past, long before Egypt or Sumeria, there existed a highly advanced global seafaring culture. This lost civilization, it is argued, possessed the knowledge and the means to accurately map the entire planet, including the coasts of Antarctica when they were free of ice. Their great library of world maps, perhaps housed at a central location like the Library of Alexandria, was mostly lost to the fires and floods of time, but some copies survived. They were passed down, recopied by generations of mariners and librarians, their meaning and origins slowly fading with each new iteration. The maps became fragmented, their projections distorted, their legends misunderstood, and it was these degraded, third-hand copies, these ghosts of a lost science, that were the ancient sources Piri-Reis consulted in his workshop in 1513. He was not mapping a new world, but unknowingly preserving a fragment of a very, very old one. It is a stunning narrative, a story of a lost golden age of science and exploration. But our dossier would be incomplete without the counterintelligence report, the sober and skeptical analysis from the world of mainstream cartography and history, and the critique is significant. First, is the landmass at the bottom of the map truly Antarctica? Skeptics argue that it may be nothing more than the coastline of South America, which is accurately depicted further north, being bent and distorted to fit onto the limited space of the gazelle skin. The notes written by Piri-Reis on this very section of the map describe the climate as warm and the land as being home to large snakes, details that are wildly inconsistent with Antarctica, but which could easily apply to the Patagonian coast. Second, there is the problem of map projections. Projecting the curved surface of a sphere onto a flat piece of parchment is a complex mathematical challenge that inevitably leads to distortion. Proponents of the ancient civilization theory claim the map uses a sophisticated equidistant projection centered on Cairo, a method far in advance of its time. Critics, however, have demonstrated that the map's geometry does not consistently fit this, or any other single advanced projection. They argue the strange shapes are more likely the result of Piri-Reis attempting to stitch together multiple maps made with different, simpler projections, leading to inevitable errors and distortions, particularly at the extreme southern edges. The file on the Piri-Reis map, therefore, remains open. The document itself is an authentic masterpiece of 16th century cartography. Its creator was a man of the highest credibility, and it contains an undeniable anomaly, a detailed depiction of a southern continent 3 centuries before its official discovery. Is it the last surviving fragment of a prehistoric, global survey, passed down through a chain of forgotten libraries? Is it proof of a lost civilization with a knowledge of our planet that would not be equaled until the modern satellite age? Or is it a fascinating but ultimately explainable product of its time? A brilliant cartographer's best attempt to reconcile incomplete reports, ancient legends of a southern land, and the inherent distortions of his craft, Piri Reis, has left us with a document that is both a map of the world and a map of the limits of our own historical knowledge. Imagine yourself in a time before our time, sitting in the deep darkness of a world without electric light. Above you is a sky so clear, so brilliant, that the stars are not distant points, but a shimmering celestial ocean. This sky was the first clock, the first calendar, and the first great book of stories. Our ancestors looked up and saw the gods, the heroes, and the monsters in the constellations. It is the story of a king, a treasure, and a dagger forged from a fallen star. In the early part of the 20th century, when the tomb of the boy king Tutankhamun was opened, the world was dazzled by the glitter of gold. There were golden chariots, a golden throne, and the magnificent golden mask that has become the very symbol of ancient Egypt. But amidst all this earthly wealth, tucked into the wrappings of the king's mummy, lay a small object of far greater rarity and significance. It was a dagger, its golden hilt exquisitely crafted, its rock crystal pommel a thing of beauty, but it was the blade that stunned the world. It was a blade of iron, flawlessly made, and in over 3,000 years spent in the silent darkness of the tomb, it had barely rusted. For decades, the blade was a puzzle. The Iron Age had not yet truly begun in Egypt at the time of Tutankhamun. Iron was a novelty, a metal far rarer and more precious than gold, and the skill required to smelt and forge it to this quality was thought to be centuries in the future. Where did this impossible blade come from? The answer, revealed by modern science, is more poetic than any historian could have imagined. The dagger was not forged from the iron of our world. Its composition, with a high content of nickel and traces of cobalt, is the unmistakable fingerprint of a meteorite. This was not a weapon made from the ores of the earth, but from the heart of a falling star. It was, quite literally, a dagger from the heavens. The ancient Egyptians themselves seemed to know this. In their texts, they had a special name for this metal, a phrase that translates as iron from the sky. They understood its celestial origin. To them, it was not just a rare material, it was a divine substance, a piece of the cosmic architecture gifted to them by the gods. The skill required to work this alien metal, to heat it and hammer it without it shattering, would have been seen as a sacred art, a form of magic entrusted only to the most masterful of craftsmen. This celestial legacy was not limited to this one famous dagger. Even earlier artifacts, a set of simple iron beads found in a pre-dynastic tomb at a place called El Gazé, were also found to be made from meteoritic iron, hammered into shape over 5,000 years ago. This shows a tradition, a long and sacred history of looking to the sky not just for guidance, but for the raw materials of power and divinity. The dagger of Tutankhamun is the culmination of this tradition, a piece of the night sky itself, resting against the heart of the king, intended to arm him with the power of the cosmos for his journey through eternity. If the sky could send down gifts of divine metal, could it also have borne witness to a history of the earth that we have all but forgotten? Our second tale tonight is a more troubling one. It is a story of artifacts that whisper of a past so different from our own that it seems to belong to another world entirely. These are stones and statues that seem to remember a time of monsters, a time when our distant ancestors, it is claimed, walked the earth alongside creatures from the age of reptiles. We journey now to two places, the arid plains of Ica, in Peru, and the town of Acambaro, in Mexico. From these two locations have emerged thousands of artifacts that, if authentic, would force us to tear up every textbook on natural history and human evolution. The Ica stones are a collection of tens of thousands of river stones, each engraved with intricate and startling images. They depict a world that is difficult to comprehend. We see images of what appear to be advanced medical procedures, brain surgery, heart transplants, cesarean sections. We see men looking at the stars through telescopes. And most shockingly of all, we see men interacting with, fighting, and even domesticating dinosaurs. There are clear depictions of humans alongside creatures that look exactly like Triceratops, Stegosaurus, and long-necked brontosaurs. Similarly, the Acambaro figurines are a collection of thousands of small ceramic statues, and they too depict a monstrous menagerie. There are statues of dinosaurs, of plesiosaurs, and most disturbingly, of humans playing with, and even being eaten by, these same reptilian giants. Let us pause here and consider what these objects are suggesting. They are not vague, mythical beasts. They are anatomically specific depictions of creatures that modern science has only known about for less than 2 centuries, creatures whose fossilized bones were a complete mystery for most of human history. If these stones and figurines are genuinely ancient, they represent a colossal paradox. They would mean that our ancestors had a deep, first-hand knowledge of the dinosaurs. It would mean that the great extinction event that wiped them out millions of years ago was not so complete, or that the timeline of human evolution is catastrophically wrong. They would be, without a doubt, the most important archaeological discoveries ever made. But this is a campfire of stories, and some tales are told to inspire wonder, while others are told as cautionary fables. The overwhelming consensus from the scientific and archaeological community is that these artifacts are not a legacy from a lost world, but a legacy of modern deception. The Ica stones have no verifiable archaeological context. They were not excavated under controlled conditions, but were sold to a collector by a local farmer, who later admitted to carving them himself, inspired by comic books and magazines. Scientific tests on the stones have been inconclusive or have pointed to a modern origin. The Acambaro figurines have a similarly troubled history. Despite claims of their discovery in an ancient burial site, archaeological investigations have found no evidence of disturbed soil that would indicate an ancient burial. Thermoluminescent dating of the figurines has produced contradictory results, but most point to them being fired in the mid-20th century. And so, the storyteller must present the tale in its entirety. The story of the stones that remembered monsters is most likely not an ancient one. It is a modern story about our own deep-seated desire for a more epic past, a wish for a time when the world was younger and more filled with terrible wonders. It is a story about the power of myth, and how easily we can be convinced to believe in a history that is more exciting than the one the evidence provides. Here, then, are 2 legacies from the sky. One is tangible, real, and scientifically verified. It is the dagger from a falling star, a genuine physical link between our world and the cosmos, a testament to our ancestors' ability to recognize the divine in the world around them. The other is a legacy of the imagination, a collection of artifacts born not from an ancient reality, but from a modern dream of a different past. One is a whisper from history, the other is an echo of our own desires. And perhaps the greatest mystery of all is learning how to tell the difference. The sky above us holds the genuine artifacts, the silent, wandering meteorites that can fall to Earth at any moment. For most of our journey so far, we have wandered through a world of stone and story, of myth and mathematics. We have stood as silent observers before the great monuments, straining to hear their secrets across a vast and silent chasm of time. What if our own age, with its unique and powerful voice, could begin a dialogue with the ancients, asking questions not with words, but with the tools of a science they could never have imagined? This is the story of that dialogue. It is the story of how 21st century technology is reaching back across the millennia, not to conquer the past with cold, hard facts, but to listen to it, to see it, and to understand it in ways that were never before possible. The first question in this dialogue is one of landscape. The past asks, where are our cities that have been swallowed by the jungle? Where are our settlements, buried and forgotten beneath the shifting sands? For centuries, the only answer was the patient work of the archaeologist with a spade and a brush. But today, science answers from the heavens. We now have eyes in the sky, high above the Earth, orbiting in the silent, black vacuum of space, are satellites that look down upon our world. They see not only in the familiar spectrum of visible light, but also in wavelengths that are invisible to the human eye. They can see in the infrared, detecting minute variations in temperature on the surface. A buried stone wall, for instance, will hold heat differently than the surrounding soil, creating a faint thermal ghost of a building that can be seen from space. These satellites can also use radar to pierce through the canopy of the densest jungle, revealing the subtle topography of the ground beneath, exposing the faint, geometric outlines of entire cities that have been lost to the world for 1,000 years. And where the view from orbit is not enough, we send our messengers to fly lower. We use a technology called LiDAR, which is like painting the world with light. An airplane flies over a landscape, firing down billions of laser pulses every minute. These pulses create a three-dimensional map of the surface, with a precision of mere inches. But its true magic is that it can see through the trees. The laser pulses find the gaps in the leaves and branches, mapping not just the top of the forest canopy, but the true shape of the ground beneath it. And in doing so, science peels back the skin of the earth. In the jungles of Central and South America, this technology has revealed the sprawling suburbs of Mayan cities and the vast networks of canals and causeways of the Khmer Empire, all of which had been completely hidden from human eyes for centuries. Science, from the sky, is redrawing the maps of the ancient world, revealing that it was far more populous, complex, and interconnected than we ever knew. The past then poses a deeper, more intimate question. It whispers from the heart of the Great Pyramid. What secrets do we hold within our solid stone, in chambers that have been sealed for 4.5 millennia? And science answers not with a drill or a hammer, but with the gentle, persistent gaze of the cosmos itself. The technology is called muography, and its power source is the universe. High in our planet's atmosphere, cosmic rays from distant, exploding stars collide with air molecules, creating a constant, silent shower of subatomic particles called muons. This cosmic rain falls upon us and the world around us every moment of every day. It passes through almost everything, our bodies, our homes, and even through hundreds of feet of solid rock. By placing highly sensitive detectors, like sheets of specialized photographic film, deep within the known passageways of a structure like the Great Pyramid, scientists can begin this cosmic conversation. They are not taking a picture with a flash, but are passively listening, collecting the footprints of the muons as they pass through. For weeks, for months, the detectors sit in the darkness, simply absorbing this cosmic rain. The principle is one of shadows. Where the stone of the pyramid is dense, fewer muons will make it through to the detector. But if there is a hidden chamber, a place of empty space, more muons will pass through that area unimpeded, creating a brighter spot on the final image. It is a slow, patient process, building up a picture of the unseen, one particle at a time. And it was this very method, this cosmic gaze, that in recent years revealed the existence of the big void within the Great Pyramid, a massive, previously unknown cavity the size of a passenger jet. It is science using the embers of dying stars as a flashlight to peer into the darkest and most secret rooms of the ancient world. The past then asks its most personal question of all. You see our buildings, you find our artifacts, but do you know who we were? Can you hear the whispers in our blood? For the longest time, the answer was no. We could only guess at the relationships between pharaohs or the origins of a mysterious people. But now, science has learned to read the most intimate and ancient of all historical texts, the scroll of life itself, our own DNA. The field of ancient DNA analysis is a miracle of modern science. From a tiny fragment of a tooth, from the dust of a bone that has rested in a tomb for thousands of years, technicians in sterile laboratories can extract the fragile, degraded remnants of the genetic code. They can piece together this broken text, amplify it, and begin to read it. And the stories it tells are profound. This technology has helped to reconstruct the family tree of Tutankhamun, confirming the identity of his parents and revealing the genetic ailments that may have afflicted his short life. It has been used to analyze the remains of the workers who built the pyramids, tracing their origins from all across the Nile Delta, proving they were a diverse community of Egyptians, not a homogeneous slave population. On a grander scale, it has allowed us to map the great migrations of our species, to watch how ancient peoples moved and mixed across continents, answering questions about who the first Americans were and how the first farmers spread across Europe. It is science at its most delicate, listening to the echoes of our ancestors that are still carried, silently, within our very cells. Finally, the past poses a challenge, a question of empathy and understanding. You have your theories about how we built our world, but can you truly comprehend the work of our hands, the strain in our backs, the knowledge that lived not in our texts, but in our muscles? And science answers with a discipline born of humility, experimental archaeology. This is the science of learning by doing. It is an attempt to leave the laboratory and the library behind, to step out into the sun, and to build the past again. Researchers, using only the materials and tools that would have been available to the ancients, attempt to replicate their incredible feats. We see teams of people trying to move multi-ton stone blocks, discovering the precise amount of water needed on the sand to make a wooden sledge glide with almost no friction. We see artisans learning to carve granite not with power tools, but with the patient, rhythmic percussion of a simple stone pounder. We see sailors building replicas of ancient reed boats to prove they could have made long ocean voyages. This is not just about testing a hypothesis. It is about recovering a lost form of knowledge, a practical wisdom that is never written down. It is in this struggle, in the feeling of the rope and the sting of stone dust, that we can have our most profound conversation with the past. It is science learning not by observing, but by participating, a way of honoring the ingenuity of our ancestors by attempting, however imperfectly, to walk in their footsteps. And in this ongoing dialogue, through these new and powerful ways of seeing and listening, the chasm of time begins to narrow. The mysteries do not all vanish, but the silence is broken, and the whispers from the past are, at last, beginning to become clear. And so, our long journey through time and mystery, through stone and stars, comes to a gentle close. We have travelled far tonight, not across space, but through the deep, echoing corridors of our own human story. We return now, not with a collection of simple answers, but with something far more precious, a deeper appreciation for the magnificent questions that our past has left for us. We began with the premise that our known history is but a single chapter in a much larger book, and in our journey, we have seen the tantalizing hints of those missing pages. We have felt the unsettling perfection of the Great Pyramid's design, a perfection that seems to speak a language of mathematics and astronomy that should not have been known. We have stood on the Giza plateau and imagined it not as a necropolis, a city of the dead, but as a place of immense, dynamic power, a great machine humming with the energies of the earth. We have listened to the testimony of the Sphinx's stone body, a story that seems to contradict its own official history, whispering of a past thousands of years deeper than our records allow. We have held in our mind's eye the impossible artifacts, the clockwork from a forgotten future, the captured lightning in a clay jar, and the dagger forged from the heart of a fallen star. Each of these mysteries is a thread, and when woven together, they do not create a clear and simple picture. Instead, they form a vast and beautiful tapestry of doubt, a rich and intricate pattern of possibility. And perhaps this is the most important realization of all. Perhaps the true legacy of these ancient wonders is not the answers they may one day provide, but the profound and necessary questions they compel us to ask in the here and now. For mystery is a great and humble teacher. It teaches us that our modern age, with all its technological marvels, is not the summit of human existence, but simply the latest step on a very long and winding road. It reminds us that there were other peaks of knowledge in the past, other forms of wisdom that we have, perhaps, forgotten how to value. Mystery teaches us the art of curiosity. It invites us to look beyond the comfortable and the accepted, to always ask, what if? It gives us permission to wonder, to speculate, and to dream. It is the engine of all discovery, the gentle but persistent voice that refuses to accept that the story is ever truly finished. And most importantly, mystery teaches us connection. In our shared wonder at the Great Pyramid, in our collective curiosity about the secrets of the Sphinx, we are connected to every human who has ever stood in their shadow and asked the same questions. We are connected to the Greek historian, the Roman traveler, the Arab scholar, and the modern scientist. We become part of a great chain of inquiry, a conversation that spans the millennia. So as you prepare now for your own journey into the quiet world of sleep, do not feel the need to solve these riddles tonight. Do not struggle to find the final piece of the puzzle. Instead, allow these questions to become gentle companions. Let the weight of their mystery be not a burden, but a comforting blanket of wonder. The true purpose of these stories is not to agitate the mind with unsolved problems, but to soothe it with the vastness of possibility. Let the questions dissolve into the quiet ocean of your own subconscious. Perhaps in that realm, in the landscape of your dreams, you will walk the corridors of the hidden library, or see the pyramids shining in their original, brilliant white under a sky of unfamiliar stars. The past is not a dead thing, locked away in a tomb. It is a living presence, a field of endless potential that surrounds us always. The questions are a gift, a legacy left to us, ensuring that we will never cease to look back in wonder and to look forward with a deeper sense of our own small but beautiful place in the great, unfolding mystery of time. My name is Mr. H. I thank you for joining me on this journey. May your rest be deep and your dreams be filled with a quiet and profound wonder. Good night.